Flipping Fed, I have no idea what in the world you guys are talking about. So I will do my best to try to make what I have to say make sense to you. Can we switch to the camera real quick, JD? You got that? Get close. Watch your glasses. Am I on track?
On fleek.
No makeup. All natural. Okay, we can go back. We can go back to the slide now. So this is the title. When I do a presentation, the title is important to me. I spend a ton of time, as Julie will tell you, it takes me forever to figure out what the title is, because I sort of come up with the title and then I go from there. Something significant about the title. I got nothing.
Right side clear.
Where do I point?
Yeah.
There we go. This is the why you should listen to me page. I don't know what it means. Derek's always telling me, you gotta talk more about your career, more about what you do. So, as you can see, my career is in athletics. I played in the NFL for 8 years. I played, any football fans out here? So I actually played in the very first game.
See?
I played in the very first game here at the new stadium. What do you call it?
Clink. It's a clink.
I played the very first game there. It was a preseason game. So that's my, yeah. So I played for the Indianapolis Colts. Good night. This is going a lot better than I thought it was going to. I have a feeling that when I do this part in the UK, it's not going to go over so I don't know what's going on, Kayla. Okay, sorry. Good. So anyway, the title, reveal. The word was significant to me. I went back and forth with a lot of different words about what should be in the title. And I really love this word reveal because to me, my whole life I was trying to find my path and like define my path. And I'll tell a story about a therapist I had later. I had a lot of therapists, so there'll be a lot of therapy stories in there. But the reveal, I started to realize in my life that my job was just to live. The path would start to reveal itself to me as I started to live. So that's going to be the gist of what I want to talk about today. This is me, clearly. Same haircut in this picture. And no clicker. Okay. So these are all the areas that I've either broken or had surgery on over my career. And so, the first lesson I want to talk about is perseverance. Perseverance has taken on a whole new meaning for me. A lot of the things I've had to persevere have been these physical things. I went for a jog this morning and I felt great, and then later on in the jog, like my hips started to hurt. I had hip surgery a few years ago, and my knees, I'm sure, will start to hurt later on in the day. But my career started, I was this big fish in this little tiny pond in college. I was an All-American, and I was a Butkus Award finalist, and I was a first-round draft pick. There's a Coldplay song. I love Coldplay. My favorite song is called Lost. There's a lyric in there that says, "You might be a big fish in a little pond, but don't think you've won, because along might come a bigger one." And that happened to me when I got in the NFL. I got to the NFL and I realized I was still a big fish. I was in a pool full of sharks. And so it didn't matter how big of a fish I was. So I got there. Our defense was terrible. Our offense was really good. We had Peyton Manning. And they came in. I came in as this first-round draft pick, and they sort of anointed me to be the savior of the defense. I was like supposed to fix everything. And I got in, and the first thing that happened is I had a contract dispute. So I held out of training camp. I was one of those guys. This selfish guys that need more money. I need that money. You saw those arrows on. And so anyway, I had a contract holdout. So I finally get to training camp, and I'm way behind the 8 ball. I don't know the defense. And so I'm starting out slow, so I'm back to the bottom of the mountain again. So I start climbing up, Start to play a little more, play a little more. We're playing the New England Patriots in like week 8. Right? I like the boot side. So we're playing the Patriots in week 8, and I am having the game of my life. It's my coming out party. I'm making plays left and right. And they toss the ball, and I run around to the side, and I plant my leg down, and my quad just snaps right out of my knee. So I got to persevere, right? So I'm back to the bottom of the barrel again. The rest of the season's gone. It was this catastrophic knee injury, and we quite frankly didn't know if I was going to play again. It's a really rare injury. You don't hear about a lot. So I worked my way back, and the next year we played the New York Jets in New York. That's my first game back, and I had like 13 or 14 tackles. Played a great game. Started to resurrect my career again. Things were great. Third year, I get out into training camp, and I'm going to stretch, and so I start doing this, and my knee won't bend anymore. So I'm like, the knee's not bending. There's a problem with this, knee won't bend. So they take me to the hospital, and I get x-rays, and this big chunk, these anchors that they put in my knee, one of them had migrated down inside my kneecap, my knee joint. So I had to have another surgery to get that out. And the surgery kind of was botched, and so I missed a bunch of time. So I'm back, perseverance again. So I worked my way back all the way into this thing. I play through my career, my first contract 5 years in. I'm a free agent. I'm certain that I'm going to make the bank, the big dollars, free agency. And I remember sitting by my phone, the free agency countdown comes, and the teams I know they're going to blow up my phone. So I'm by my phone, I'm talking to my agent. My agent's like, we think the Chiefs maybe, the Colts say they're going to give an offer, blah, blah, blah. No calls. 0. None. So I got to persevere, right? So ultimately I re-signed with the Colts for minimum wage, which I will admit in the NFL minimum wage is not the same. So it wasn't super disappointing. But now, for the first time in my life, I'm not a starter, I'm a backup special teams player. So I have two choices. What usually happens is when you're a high draft pick and you've been a starter and you become a backup, you fade into obscurity and you're never seen from again, right? But I decided I was going to persevere. I was going to become the best backup special teams player that I could be. So I did that. A couple years I'm playing. We have some issues that I'm going to talk about in a little bit with my team. And I find my way back into the starting lineup. We go on this epic run, win the Super Bowl. Things are great. I get a new contract. And then I'm running around and my other knee does the same thing. There's over, right? So perseverance, but here's what I've learned about perseverance. I always thought that perseverance was just the strength that I gather from overcoming, right? Or the great lessons that I will learn if I can just dig through there. That's not perseverance. For me, and I think for a lot of us, and you'll see later on in my story, perseverance is simply staying in the game long enough to learn the lessons that life is going to teach you. That was a huge thing for me to learn, and a super important thing for me to learn as well. So I kind of quickly glossed over this. There was that part where I wasn't a starter anymore, and then I was, and we made this epic run to the Super Bowl. So let me tell you that story. And this will explain this next thing that's important to me. So we're playing the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm a backup player, right? I'm pretty happy at this point. Making pretty good money. I'm not getting injured as much. I'm not playing as much. We're 10-2 at the time. That's pretty good. For those of you that's 10 wins, 2 losses. The Jacksonville Jaguars are not very good, right? But we're actually not quite as good a team as we look on paper. So we get to Jacksonville. First play of the game, they hand the ball off. Fred Taylor runs like 75 yards for a touchdown. I'm on the sideline, so I'm like, that's what you get for taking me out. And so anyway, to make the long story short, they run the ball for 375 yards. That's second highest total since 1970. So one of the reporters after the game, this guy was great. He's actually a jerk. This was great. He said, you know, the Jaguars, they ran for 375 yards, and they would have ran for 500 yards, but the end zone kept getting in the way. That was the problem. And so anyway, after the story, anyone know who Tony Dungy is? That was our coach, great coach, got high moral character, great guy. So they're talking to Tony Dungy, and they're like, what are you going to change? Something drastic has to happen. Now keep in mind, this is a guy that's taken, you know, 2 teams to 3 or 4 championship games, not Super Bowls, but NFC and AFC championship games. So he's a great coach. It's a great system. They're like, what are you going to change? You know, which personnel are you going to put in? You know, what's your plan? Like something drastic has to happen. And he told the reporter something that really changed the way I view things, my perspective. Is he said, you've got to change anything. The defense works. The guys on the field, they know how to do it. We're not going to make changes just for the sake of making changes. He says, as a matter of fact, we might do less. We'll scale this thing back. The reason why he said that was because he was focused on the process. He did not let the outcome of a single game derail everything he believed in to be true. Everything that had been successful in his life, he did not let that derail him. I've seen this happen. I've seen people who are so focused on the outcome that it invalidates their whole process. And I've seen it happen to the CEO of Unique. Don't tell him I told you this. So Derek and I, we've become friends. We work out together every day. And have you seen him lately? Right? Hey, Reagans. Hello. Yeah, he looks great. He's doing good. So we decide we're going to go get a DEXA scan. A DEXA scan is this X-ray machine that measures bone density. It tells you to the ounce how much fat you have, how much muscle you have, how much of it's bone, yada, yada, yada. So we go in there. So my diet hadn't been great. You know, my workouts were so-so. So I go in there, and I have this number in my head of, I was thinking, okay, if I'm like under 18 or 19%, I'm going to be super happy. That was the outcome I was expecting. Derek, his expectation was, I think he was hoping for 16 or 17%. Now keep in mind, he's made great changes. His debilitating pain is gone. He can move around. I mean, he's constantly saying how much his life has changed, how much better he feels. So we go there, we get the scans. My results pop out, and mine says 14.7% body fat. And I'm like, woo! So my first thing is, let's go get milkshakes. Now keep in mind, I'm not happy with my process. My process isn't great, but the outcome was better than I expected. So all of a sudden I'm like, oh, milkshakes, we can do it. Let's do it. Derek's scan came out, and his was like, stop filming. His was like 20%, which was still good. He was devastated. I thought I was going to have to talk him off the edge of the cliff. And he couldn't believe it. And I said, bro, think about all the times you tell me how much your life has changed, how much better you feel, how your debilitating back pain is gone. And tell me that you're not better now, but this outcome that you've been focused on has totally derailed the process. It totally invalidated everything we've done for a year. So this is a great lesson I learned from my experience with Derek and my experience with Tony Dungy, is that when things go south, and they usually are south temporarily, we need to go back and focus on the process, right? And this happens all the time in wellness. My job is wellness, right? I'm going to talk more about wellness in the second portion. But especially in weight loss, this is a huge problem, right? We have this number, and when we don't hit it, even though we feel better, our life has changed, our belts fit better, we lose track of all the great things that have happened because of an outcome. So focus on the process, not the outcome. Process-based thinking is huge. And big, huge goals and dreams are okay. But when we have these giant, big, hairy, audacious goals, as Jim Collins calls them in his book, Built to Last, right? They're only effective if they inspire us, but a lot of times they don't inspire us. They demotivate us. So keep that in mind. Focus on the process, not the outcome. I would be remiss if I didn't add one thing. Tony Dungy did make one change. When he inserted me back into the starting line. That's the ... and humble part of me coming out. Crack myself up. That is a great picture. There's a story behind this picture. The guy takes the picture of the Super Bowl, and it's on Getty Images, and anytime I would try to get it, it has this watermark, Getty Images on it. So I'm emailing the guy, I'm like, hey, I'm Rob Morris. Can I get the picture? Oops, what happened? Can I get the picture, for free? Do I have to? It was like $600 to get the picture. So Tori invites me to start speaking at this thing. So I'm like, I know how I get the picture. So this picture is courtesy of Unique, $600. It didn't cost me a dime. This is a hard one for me. The interesting thing, I'm going to talk a little bit now and then a little bit after lunch. And the meat and the potatoes is after lunch, the real stuff. But this concept of acceptance, I'm just learning despite everything that happened to me. This story of this year where my career sort of got resurrected and then went down and came up and ultimately resurrected. I went to the Super Bowl, got a new contract, yada, yada. There's so much more going on where I really learned this acceptance. The beginning of the year when I was still a backup player, I was in training camp. My wife was in Utah, I was in Indiana, she was pregnant. And so she's going in to get her first, thingy.
Massage.
It's the heartbeat one. It's not. It's early on. We're not figuring out sex.
Doppler.
Yeah. Whatever.
Yeah.
You've all got this. So she calls me from the hospital because we're going to hear the heartbeat. And we had a hard time having kids. We had one child. And this was in vitro, and we had put in 2 embryos because they said if you put in 2, you have a 40% chance of getting 1. And so she calls me, and we're on the phone, and the doctor's about ready to do the thing, and she all of a sudden she starts this tirade of profanities. It's like, oh my. And she says, so it turns out that we're not just expecting our second child, but our third and our fourth. So triplets. So it's identical twin girls and a boy. And so she's little. She's 5'2", 105 pounds. She's not a big lady. About 17 weeks in, she was out in Indianapolis at this time. About 17 weeks into the pregnancy, she was admitted to the hospital. She was going to be in the hospital for the rest of her pregnancy. So I'm trying to play in the season. My wife's in the hospital. We have a 3-year-old son at the time. So I would get up, get the son to the babysitter, go to work, work all day, come pick him up, head to the hospital, spend time with mom at the hospital, rinse and repeat. And it was overwhelming. I didn't know how to accept that this was happening in my life, but I had to accept this is what's going to happen. So we did it. I accepted it. We kept moving forward. We moved back. And then October 31st, it's Halloween, and I had my son out trick-or-treating. I got a phone call from my wife, or from the hospital. They said, you need to come in. Your wife's not doing great. So I get in, and she's 21 weeks pregnant at the time, right? So they're real babies now. And they had to rush her back to surgery. And we lost the little boy. His name was Elliot. We later named him Elliot. But they thought we might be able to keep the twin girls there's a chance we can do it. The next day, we lost the twin girls. So this was a great lesson for me of acceptance because I'm a control freak by nature, and I cannot control this situation. Now, to make matters even worse, is if you've had children, then you understand what happens between a woman and a child, right? When that child kicks, that's your child. You're connected to the child. As a man, we don't have that connection until we hold the baby and it looks us in the eyes. And so she was devastated and grieving, and I was hurting, but not the way she was hurting. Because I couldn't control the situation. I didn't know how to accept what was happening to me. Acceptance doesn't mean that we like it. It doesn't mean that we understand it. It just means that we become willing to deal with it. And so I had to not only learn how to deal with the loss of these 3 babies, but how to deal with the fact that I wasn't grieving like my wife was grieving, which caused me a tremendous amount of guilt because I obviously felt horrible, but I didn't have that same connection. And I didn't understand her whole grieving process either. And so Derek wrote this book called What Great Things. And I was reading it, and I learned something really important about acceptance. When I think back to this difficult time in our life. Now keep in mind, this is happening at the same time that my whole up and down career thing is happening. And Derek in his book said, sometimes God calms the seas, and sometimes God lets the seas rage on and he calms the sailor. And to me, that's acceptance. Not knowing if the seas are going to become calm or if I'm going to have a chance to become calm. That was a huge, huge turning point for me in my life. Because I say that this won't mean much to you, but when I say it in Utah in this little spirit where I'm like a big deal. Because I'm Rob Morris. I was an All-American. I tackle people. I'm strong. I can move large objects. I can do all these things, but I have no control over this aspect of my life, which is acceptance. So why do I tell that story? 2 reasons. Number 1, because most of you have had it, and if not, it's coming, the big storm, right? And it's not always about, sometimes it's just about surviving the storm. My whole life I thought it was about controlling the storm, right? Or learning from the storm. Sometimes it's just about surviving the storm. The storm is going to come. The question is, what are you going to do when you get to it? The second reason I tell this story is because as a man, I don't understand what you are thinking. I did not understand how my wife was grieving. I didn't know the best ways to help her. And one thing I hear over and over and over from the presenters is that sometimes your business puts a strain on your relationships, right? And so sometimes I think, particularly when you're dealing with your men, you may have to practice some of that. And just remember, we are trying desperately to lift you up and to build you up. But for a lot of men, like my wife is a Muay Thai fighter. Some of you saw my Facebook post. She just won her fight last week in Vegas by a 3rd-round knockout. She's pretty awesome. I have to accept the fact that she trains with all dudes all the time. That can be hard for me as a husband. And so I guess I wanted to throw in my defense for men because I knew I was going to be the only one here. But we're trying. Sometimes you have to accept us for who we are and for what we're trying to do. So those are 3 lessons: perseverance, processes, and acceptance. What's really interesting is I thought I had learned a lot while that was happening, but I learned very little. The second part of my presentation, I'm going to tell you how all of these lessons became very real to me and how you can cope with the things that you need to persevere through. How process-based thinking can impact not only your life, but your business. And how sometimes when the storm gets bad, how we just have to accept it. So I'm going to stop right there, and we're going to go to lunch, and then when we come back, I'm going to tell you the meat and potatoes of the rest of my story. So thanks for listening.